11 o'clock appointment with Mr. Gallagher of personnel. 1 o'clock luncheon with the representative of the Blakeboro Paper Company.
Marilyn Monroe was found dead in bed under circumstances that were in tragic contrast to her glamorous career as a comic talent.
We also learned more today about the FBI's secret files on Marilyn Monroe. They reveal some of her friends were suspected communists, and she once considered traveling to the Soviet Union. The FBI kept files on her from 1955 until her death in 1962.
For decades, the world believed Marilyn Monroe's death was just another Hollywood tragedy. A lonely starlet lost too soon, swallowed by fame, heartbreak, and the relentless glare of the spotlight. But now new revelations have surfaced. Darker, colder, and more human than anyone ever imagined. They don't just challenge the story we were told, they unravel it. They force us to look again at the woman behind the legend and ask, was Marilyn Monroe ever truly free? Or was she just the most beautiful pawn in Hollywood's most haunting game? She began life not as an icon, but as a frightened little girl named Norma Jean Mortensen, born in Los Angeles in 1926 during an era that had no mercy for the poor or the unwanted. Her childhood was a blur of foster homes and loneliness. Her mother, plagued by mental illness, drifted in and out of psychiatric hospitals, leaving Norma Jean to survive on the kindness of strangers. It was there, in those early years of instability and rejection, that she learned her first lesson about survival, that to be loved, she had to become what others wanted her to be. That truth would follow her for the rest of her life, shaping every smile, every pose, every shimmering moment on screen. When the camera first found her, she wasn't Marilyn Monroe yet, just a young woman with bright eyes, a shy smile, and a desperate hunger to belong. But Hollywood doesn't reward innocence. It consumes it. Studios took Norma Jean and sculpted her into something unreal. Hair bleached to sunlight, lips painted to perfection, her laugh trained to sparkle like champagne. They gave her a new name, a new identity, and a promise, eternal fame in exchange for herself. And she accepted. Because in the world she came from, even illusion felt like hope. The transformation was breathtaking. By the early 1950s, Marilyn Monroe was not just a movie star. She was the embodiment of desire itself. Men adored her. Women envied her. Cameras worshipped her. Every move she made became myth. Yet, behind the glossy magazine covers and flirtatious movie roles, something fragile trembled beneath the surface. She wasn't just performing for the world. She was performing to survive it. Each laugh, each seductive glance was armor against the fear that she wasn't enough. Because deep down, Marilyn still carried the little girl who had been abandoned, the one who believed love was something you had to earn. As her fame soared, so did her loneliness. The Marilyn Monroe the world saw was untouchable, but the woman inside was unraveling. She longed for genuine love, for someone who could see through the glamour to the broken heart beneath. She married baseball legend Joe DiMaggio, hoping to find peace in simplicity, but DiMaggio couldn't handle the world's obsession with her. Their marriage collapsed under the weight of jealousy and public scrutiny. Then came playwright Arthur Miller, the intellectual, the thinker, the man who seemed to understand her mind. But even that love turned into disillusionment. Miller wrote characters inspired by her fragility, dissected her pain for art, and in the process, reminded her again and again that she was seen not as a woman, but as a symbol, a muse for other people's stories. Never her own, Hollywood was relentless. Studios overworked her, mocked her lateness, and punished her emotional exhaustion. She began taking sleeping pills to find rest and stimulants to stay awake. It was a dangerous cycle, one that blurred the line between performance and existence. Friends spoke of a Marilyn who was always tired, always anxious, always afraid of fading away. The laughter that once charmed millions became a whisper. The sparkle in her eyes dimmed into something haunted. By 1962, she had become both the most famous and the most fragile woman in the world, a contradiction wrapped in diamonds and despair. Then came the night that would define her legacy forever. August 4th, 1962. Marilyn Monroe was found dead in her Los Angeles home. The world woke to headlines that stunned the globe. Marilyn Monroe dead at 36. Officially, the cause was ruled as a probable suicide, an overdose of barbiturates. The conclusion was simple, perhaps too simple, a sad ending for a sad woman. But from the beginning, the details didn't add up. Her phone lines had been suddenly removed. Her housekeeper's timeline shifted in each retelling. The scene appeared disturbingly staged, a neatly arranged body, a phone in her hand, empty pill bottles perfectly aligned. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some said she had been silenced by powerful men. Others whispered about a love affair with President John F. Kennedy and then his brother Robert. Conspiracy theories wove their way through history, suggesting that Marilyn knew too much about politics, about secrets, about the kind of power that could destroy nations. And while the truth was buried beneath decades of speculation, something undeniable remained. Marilyn Monroe's death was not peaceful. It was desperate, it was chaotic, and it left behind a shadow that refused to fade. Over the years, investigators, biographers, and journalists all tried to piece together the final hours of her life. Yet every new discovery only deepened the mystery. There were reports of missing tapes, recordings of her phone calls, allegedly taken by intelligence agencies. There were witnesses who claimed to have seen men leaving her house that night, men in suits who didn't belong there. And now, in 2025, a series of newly declassified documents has brought the entire story into chilling focus. These documents, once buried in archives and protected under government seal, suggest that Marilyn Monroe was under surveillance during her final months. Her relationships with the Kennedy brothers had drawn unwanted attention from intelligence officials, worried that her emotional instability and fame could make her a liability. Records indicate that Monroe may have been in possession of sensitive information, details about nuclear testing and political scandals shared in pillow talk, never meant to leave those private rooms. And as her mental health deteriorated, as she began threatening to tell the truth to the press, she unknowingly stepped into dangerous territory. It's here, in this newly unearthed evidence, that the tragedy deepens. According to the reports, in the days before her death, Marilyn made several frantic phone calls to journalists, to friends, even to former lovers, claiming she was going to hold a press conference. She wanted to reveal what really goes on behind closed doors in Washington. Hours later, she was gone. The coroner's report, long criticized for inconsistencies, now seems even more suspicious. Traces of bruising that didn't fit the story. Missing toxicology evidence. Witness statements altered after the fact. It paints a portrait not of suicide, but of silence, a silence imposed by fear and power. And if these revelations are true, the implications are devastating. Marilyn Monroe's death may not have been an act of self-destruction, but an act of erasure, a silencing of a woman who knew too much and mattered too little to those in control. It wasn't just Hollywood that consumed her. It was a system that feared her voice more than her vulnerability. The woman who embodied beauty and desire became the victim of a world that only valued her as long as she played her part. In the decades since her death, Marilyn's image has been immortalized, plastered on posters, printed on T-shirts, recreated in art and fashion. But how many have truly seen her? The real woman, not the laughing blonde or the glamorous seductress, but the lonely soul who begged for love and found only emptiness in its place. Her tragedy has become a myth, her life a brand, her death a question mark. And yet, through it all, her eyes still speak, in photographs, in films, in the fragments of interviews that remain. They speak of a woman who was both adored and abandoned, desired and destroyed. Now, as these new truths come to light, the story of Marilyn Monroe takes on a new, haunting shape. It's no longer just about fame or addiction or heartbreak. It's about the machinery of power, the way it devours those who challenge it. It's about how the most beautiful woman in the world could also be the most disposable. The more we learn, the more her death feels less like a tragedy of chance, and more like the inevitable consequence of a system built to consume beauty and discard it when it becomes inconvenient. But perhaps what makes Marilyn's story endure is not the mystery itself, but what it reveals about us, about the world's obsession with perfection, about our hunger to possess what we don't understand. about how society builds women up as idols only to watch them fall, and then to dissect their remains for entertainment. Marilyn wasn't the first, and she won't be the last. But she became the face of that cycle, the ghost who haunts the edges of fame. In the end, the newly uncovered truth doesn't just rewrite her death, it redefines her life. Marilyn Monroe was never just a victim of her own fragility. She was a woman trapped between the world's fantasies and her own desperate search for reality. A woman who dared to reach for love in a world that only wanted her image. And when she tried to reclaim her voice, the world, or something far more powerful, made sure it was never heard again. And so, as we look back now, decades later, we must ask ourselves, was Marilyn ever truly seen? Or was she just reflected? A projection of everything we desired and feared? Her story, stripped of the glamour, is one of profound loneliness and human fragility. Behind every photo, every film, every seductive laugh was a heart breaking quietly in plain sight. The mystery, it seems, has finally been solved. But the answer isn't comforting. It's devastating. Because it tells us not only how Marilyn Monroe died, but how the world helped kill her. It reveals a truth that fame can be as fatal as poison, that beauty can be a weapon, and that even the brightest stars can be extinguished not by fate, but by design. In the end, Marilyn's story is no longer just about a Hollywood icon. It's a mirror, a reflection of the cost of perfection, of the dangers of desire, and of the tragedy of being human in a world that loves its illusions more than its truth. And somewhere in the quiet beyond the flashbulbs and fame, Norma Jean is still waiting, not to be adored, not to be worshipped, but simply to be understood.